So welcome back into the program. Glad you're with us here for Hour 3. And Liz, why don't we go ahead and get to the bottom line, please?
Here's the bottom line.
Here's the bottom line.
We need to get to the bottom of this.
Get to the bottom of this.
We've got to get to the bottom of this.
The bottom line on the Mark Cox Show.
That's the only way we're going to get to the bottom of this.
That's the bottom line.
Truth! You can't handle the truth.
We are joined today by St. Louis Alderman Jeffery Boyd, kind enough to come in the studio and give us a little bit of his time. How are you?
I'm outstanding. Yourself?
I'm doing well. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Absolutely. Hey, wanted to get your opinion on this because this happened outside of the Circuit Court building earlier this week. Whoops. There we go. Whoops. Hold on. Darn these computers anyway. Let's try it again.
We're going downtown and we're going to shut it down. We're going downtown, we're going to shut it down.
Those are the folks claiming that they're going to organize mass protests in this Jason Stockley case. Nobody knows quite when the verdict is going to come down. Some people think tomorrow. Others, I'm saying, are speculating now next week. What's your reaction to that? Do you support what we may be about to witness here?
Well, certainly I don't support what happened in Ferguson. And some of the comments that I heard, it could explode and potentially be worse than happened in Ferguson. And that's not something I support. Now, I do support protests. I think due to protests, we can actually change and make communities different. And so there's a place for it, but then there's a place that is not for it. I don't support publicizing it in a manner right now before a verdict, because it looks like it's an intimidation factor. And one of the things we don't want to do is intimidate the judicial process in any way whatsoever. Yeah,
I'm glad to hear you say that. I haven't heard a lot of people speak out about that a great deal. This is the first part of what those folks, the group, I can't remember the guy's name who stood up and spoke on camera, but this is the first part of what he said the other day.
We're going downtown and we're going to shut it down. We're going downtown, we're going to shut it down.
Protesters chanting they will shut down the airport, a Cardinals game, downtown, and other targets if Stockley is not convicted.
We're telling you right now, we're organized in a way that you're going to see mass disruption, be it plane, train, and automobile. No matter what the game is, the game will stop. No matter what the business is. See, this is not just downtown. This is not just Ferguson. This is the whole region.
We want justice.
So the reason I play that is so that people understand who maybe weren't familiar with the story, Alderman Boyd, that the threat is area-wide. If the verdict doesn't come down in the manner in which this particular group is hoping, which I'm guessing is a guilty verdict for Officer Stockley, that's... We have no reason to believe they won't do it, I guess, at this point. And it's more than just standing on the street with a street sign and a protest. I mean, this is disrupting workplaces and potentially the ball game and everything else.
Well, Mark, I think what you're experiencing is a situation in which people feel they've been disenfranchised. You know, they're tired of the system and the way it is. And from police officers and community members that I've talked about, everyone has pretty much said that the officer is guilty. You know, it's very unusual for an officer to be found guilty of murder when there's a police shooting. There's always an explanation for why it's justified. I understand state statute and law is pretty much on the police officer side in most cases, but there are cases when it's murder. And so from all the evidence, and you're talking about just the community litigating this case and not having the absolute 100% facts, they want to see a guilty verdict. And if they don't see a guilty verdict, it's like the same thing over and over again, and that black lives doesn't matter.
Well, I understand that frustration, but the conclusion that he's guilty, it strikes me as odd that when this was first brought to Jennifer Joyce in 2011, she came out and said there wasn't enough evidence to charge. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, a few years later, we have new evidence, which the police at the time that information came out disputed that there was anything new about the evidence. They claimed it's evidence that they had all along, which might lead some to believe that for political reasons they felt like they needed to take this to trial. So I guess my argument is if there was a prosecutor, in this case Jennifer Joyce, who I think most people thought pretty highly of, didn't think at one point there was enough evidence to even bring it to trial, it wouldn't be a huge surprise to me if it went to trial and he was not convicted. And what we saw this week was basically people standing up, as you mentioned, and I was glad to hear you say it, firing a shot across the bow of the judicial system and basically warning Judge Wilson, if we don't get the verdict we want, this place is about to explode.
Right, but I question whether Jennifer Joyce, the circuit attorney at the time, had all the facts. Was there some facts that were suppressed that she wasn't aware of, and then all of a sudden it came out? I mean, there was a call for videotape for a long time, is my understanding, that was never released. And so once that videotape became public, then all of a sudden, aha, you know, there is more information.
Yeah, but the prosecutor had access to that tape, even if the public didn't.
Yeah, but also understand there were some things going on in the circuit attorney's office that was inappropriate in different situations. I can't remember the name, but there was a cover-up that involved a police officer, a circuit attorney, and that person ended up being fired. Matter of fact, infamous father, I can't remember.
Who had a personal relationship or something with an officer? Is that what you were talking? I think I remember the case, but I don't remember.
I remember the circuit attorney father being someone in the business community, a big person.
Okay. All right.
But anyway, there was some impropriety going on then. Maybe there was something inappropriate or impropriety that had existed by concealing the tape. Maybe they knew about it, but they just didn't want to prosecute. But then once it gets out in the universe, you have no choice.
But I mean, I know we have a new circuit attorney now in the city of St. Louis. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other on this particular case. Chet Pleben, who's a defense attorney who's defended a lot of police officers in this particular case, was on this radio station yesterday saying a lot of the people he knows on the attorney side don't think they're going to get a conviction. He thinks they overcharged in this case, which we saw in Baltimore and a few other places. As we keep going down the road, there are going to be other cases like this. You can't have a situation where every time the judicial system doesn't rule in the manner that some of these folks who are frustrated feel it should, that things get burned down. Now, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen in St. Louis, but in effect here, that's kind of what they're threatening. They're kind of threatening to block streets and all of that same stuff just because they didn't get the verdict they wanted. I have no control over that verdict. You have no control over that verdict.
And certainly the attorney and the lawyer is only speculating. And if I was a lawyer, I would probably say the same thing, where it looks like, you know, it's going to move in our favor. I mean, that's what lawyers get paid to do.
He's not the attorney for Jason Stockley. His firm has nothing to do with that. He was just giving his opinion based on what he's hearing from other attorneys who've looked at the facts in this case. Just like you have, right? You're giving me your opinion based on your perceptions of this case.
I'm going to give you my opinion based on some simple facts that I understand. So there was a weapon that was found. Allegedly, he had a weapon. He was going to fire at the police officer. He feared for his life. But there's no DNA evidence on that weapon that belongs to the young man. The only DNA on the weapon belongs to the police officer. The police officer had a personal weapon, which was in violation of police policy. Why did he have that?
But that's not the weapon he used to kill.
I know it wasn't the weapon he used to kill.
But he got fired because of that, right?
He did.
Okay.
But it also speaks to his character. What else had he been doing that was wrong? Obviously, he didn't follow policy and protocol. He just did what he wanted to do until he got caught.
Oh, okay. But I guess he's not on trial.
DNA evidence doesn't lie.
But he's not on trial for character violation.
Right.
He's on trial for first-degree murder.
So we have no reason to believe Officer Stockley. None whatsoever.
I guess my question is, where does that lead us down the road, though? Because as you said right at the beginning of this, the law tends to be on the side of these police officers. If he can convince that judge that he feared for his life, that he had reason to fear for his life, and check me if I'm wrong on this, although there's been insinuations that he planted the gun, there's no video evidence of it, and nobody saw him do it who's testified to it. If he felt he was in fear of his life, that judge can't find him guilty of first-degree murder. Now, those are just the facts. If that's the way the facts come out, does that justify the kind of activities that are being threatened on St. Louis right now?
I don't think it would justify that type of activity. The last thing we need in the city of St. Louis is to burn down the city of St. Louis. Okay, that is the absolute last thing we need to happen in the city of St. Louis. But we also need to make sure that we have credible, honest justice in our community. He's convicted based on circumstantial evidence with me, period, dot. I mean, he had.
Well, it seems to be the same case with these folks who are so convinced he's guilty that they're threatening to act out on it, right?
Listen, Mark, chances are the man is guilty just based on his character. He cannot be trusted. I wouldn't trust anything he says on a witness stand.
Well, obviously the police felt that way too, because even though he wasn't charged in 2011, they fired him for violating policies by having his own gun in the car, right?
But let me tell you something that frustrates me with that. We have bad police officers that do bad things against our citizens, and we just fire them. And then they go to another police department and do bad things and get fired.
Yeah, but he wasn't fired for doing something bad against the citizen. He was fired for breaking department policy and having his own firearm in the car, right?
And that's just all that we know.
Well, but that's all that we know. I mean, it's a personnel file, so we don't know for sure why he was fired. I'm making an assumption, and so are you, right?
Right. But I've also talked to police officers that were aware of this this gentleman, and some of them said they didn't understand how he even got hired to be a police officer. There was something flawed in his character whereby he should have never been allowed to go through the police academy.
As an elected official in the city of St. Louis, are you convinced that the police department is prepared to handle whatever might happen after this verdict is over? I've been hearing from some police sources that people aren't taking it real seriously, and that maybe politics is playing a role in that threat not being taken very seriously.
Well, I'm not sure of politics. That would be irresponsible if politics is playing a role that is not taken serious. It should be taken very seriously, and I would bet my quarters on the fact that the St. Louis Police Department will be prepared.
All right. Jeff Boyd, it's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time, my friend. I appreciate that. All right, I got to run to a break here real quick. I'll get to your phone calls in a minute. 314-969-9797. Toll free 866-455-9797. You're listening to The Mark Cox Show.
The Mark Cox Show on FM News Talk 97.1, 98.7, AM 1490, and 97.1talk.com.
Look for the 97.1 Freedom Fleet out and about this summer in the St. Louis region. Check out the list of events at 97.1talk.com and ask for a sticker when you see the 97.1 Freedom Fleet, powered by Dent Devil of St. Louis, professional cosmetic car care.
At St. Louis Men's Clinic,